Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this very special webinar by AdTech and Amazon Ads on programmatic advertising trends and opportunities. I'm Shaini, your host for today, and I handle content at AdTech New Delhi and iMedia events in India. In the last 1.5 years, digital has been at the forefront in terms of driving innovation and efficiency for advertisers. I'm sure all of you agree with me there. And programmatic advertising has been in focus and is now soaring to new and exciting heights, with ad spends expected to accelerate to nearly 100 billion. Yes, you heard it right, $100 billion in 2022 globally. This growing method for buying ads has quickly become a crucial component for brands' media plans. Programmatic can help you reach consumers across all points of the marketer's funnel with real-time optimization. And it's no wonder that marketers in India are putting more than 40% of their display and video budgets into programmatic advertising. Data and analytics have been the key pillars to help them in this journey, and marketers have become creative with them, experimenting with diverse targeting and measurement options, dynamic creatives, multi-channel approaches to create relevant experiences for their target audience, and much more. The journey has its challenges and concerns like any other, related to brand safety, suitability, viewability, ad fraud, and all this has come to the fore. And as an industry, we are constantly striving to counter these challenges through ad tech interventions. As we plan our media strategies for the next year now, today's discussion will focus on the evolution of the programmatic journey and the opportunities for 2022. We will discuss the decreasing gap between brand and performance marketing, thanks to more efficient consumer targeting, measurability, transparency of media buying through programmatic channels, and how it's influenced the marketing scenario overall. To talk about all this and more, we have with us an esteemed set of speakers. So let's welcome Anil Pandit, who's the Senior Vice President at Publicis Media and heads their programmatic practice. Welcome, Anil. It's great to have you with us here.
Thank you, Shaini. Thanks for having me.
So Anil has 20 years of rich corporate experience across media and advertising, online aggregator startups, and global media tech. He has been an early proponent in the programmatic space and has helped international DSP platforms establish the programmatic practice in India. He's also helped many brands in their journey of the adoption of this data and ad tech enabled practice. Next up, we have with us Shashi Shekhar Mukherjee, who is the head of digital marketing at media at Reckitt. Welcome, Shashi. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Shaini. Thanks for having me here. Pleasure to be part of the panel.
Great to have you here. Shashi has over 15 years of experience in digital strategy, integrated media planning, and content marketing. He's worked across creative agencies from Publicis, Rediffusion, YNR to media agencies like GroupM. He's now heading the digital marketing at Reckitt for their marquee brands like Dettol, Durex, Moo, Veet, and many more. Thank you, Shashi. Next up, we have Manik Mahajan, who's the Director for Digital Marketing and E-Commerce at Philips Domestic Appliances. Welcome, Manik. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Shaini. Same here, it feels awesome.
Manik handles the complete digital marketing, e-commerce, and e-store for Philips Domestic Appliances. Previously, he was with Michelin Tires and Reckitt, where he has broad exposure across sales and marketing functions. Next up, we have with us Mayank Bhatnagar, who's the head of marketing for Amazon Ads. Welcome, Mayank. Great to have you here as well.
Thanks, Shani. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be part of the panel.
Thank you. So Mayank is a product marketing enthusiast who's passionate about technology marketing for products and services. He has been with Amazon for more than 6 years now, heading the marketing function for their advertising business in India. Before Amazon, Mayank was associated with Adobe Systems, where he handled digital marketing mix portfolio for their technical communication products. I think we have a great set of speakers here, and I am just itching to start with the first question. So the first question, Anil, is to you, because I think you've witnessed this evolution of the programmatic industry for the longest, and you've been in leadership positions doing that. So please take us through the top 3 drivers that you think is behind this growth from an ad tech perspective.
Thanks, Shiny, for that question. In fact, you have already put in a lot of data points around programmatic, right? We all know that it's a rapidly evolving space, and it has only gotten more accelerated in the last few years, right? There are many factors, but if I have to choose and club it under just 3, then the first one will, of course, be the advent of the privacy era that we are all witnessing, right? With privacy laws being chalked out across markets to honor consumer privacy, it has been forcing many ad tech players, including DSPs, to fall in line. But at the same time, the opportunity to better the game by creating, say, more personalized experiences for consumers is also increasing. And where the clear choice is going programmatic due to its data-driven advertising capabilities. Now, the second would be more and more channels are coming within the fold of programmatic if you actually watch out. This includes programmatic audio, programmatic out of home, connected TV, and added to this is the recent one called voice ads, where you can just converse with the ad on the go while listening to your favorite music. So what this is actually doing is making the programmatic consolidation story even more potent and irresistible across all consumer media touchpoints. And hence, programmatic is a clear winner there. Going programmatic will be able to solve all your problems while touching consumer journeys and all consumer touch points. The third, Shiny, I feel is, of course, the need to bring in the right measurement, as you rightly hinted in your introduction, which helps brands to measure online to offline and vice versa, more so when consumer purchase journeys are no longer linear these days, right? This is where using programmatic and the right measurement tech stack along with it helps in unifying the impact of every dollar spent and help in understanding the impact on actual business outcomes. So I think these are the 3 that I would quote, which are helping push programmatic forward and further.
Great, thank you, Anil. I think that was a wonderfully well-rounded answer, and you took us through all the 3 important parameters there. Coming to you, Shashi, on the same bit, like Anil said, one of the potent things is that programmatic makes it so easy to buy across channels, across audiences. How is your audience marketing strategy or your audience targeting strategy? I mean, what is the role that programmatic plays in your media plans? And how do you, kind of make sure that you're targeting the right people across channels? And it'll be great if you can share an example as well with us.
Sure, Shiny. Thanks for the question. So I think, as you rightly said, programmatic helps you target, all nodes in the consumer journey. That's one. And especially, when you are marketing a mass brand, which will have various audience cohorts inside one big brand, right? I mean, there, for example, a young mother would be, transacting or engaging with you in a different way versus an established family or active Gen Z. Now, big brands will all have these different audience segmentations, and it is important for us to identify the various value segments that actually help you in the business, and then go ahead and activating them. And programmatic actually helps you to do it at an ease as well as at a scale. The second reason I would say of doing programmatic, another big important reason is, as I said, you have multiple segments. It also helps you to have personalized communication, that too at scale. Now, multiple platforms, multiple, cohorts, and doing this personalized communication helps definitely a lot in adding, relevance to your communication, which in turn will actually give you a higher media metrics or, better engagement on your own social platforms. So overall, I would say that, programmatic has a lot of benefits over regular advertising, and today about 90% of my of our spends on is behind programmatic out of the video and display budget. So that's the extent at which we believe in the technology, and also we have been kind of reaping a lot of benefits. For us, Shiny, one thing to point is that for us, life stages are important. right? Whether I talk about Durex, whether I talk about Dettol, Wheat, Move, life stages are important, right? And basis that our most of our segmentation is on life stages, that helps us to serve our audiences better with the right content.
Fantastic. So you're saying that 90% of your media spends are on programmatic because of the scale, the targeting, and the life stages and the cohorts that it offers. Fantastic,
So
I think.
I am above the average of 40% you mentioned.
Definitely. You're above the average of the global programmatic spender as well. From all that I was reading, they are also kind of, India is around 40%, globally we are around 50%. So you are way above. You're living in. Thank you so much, Shashi. Manik, same question to you. Philips has also been innovating to create superior connections with their audiences, at various life stages, through cross age, gender, household income. What is your take on the ability of programmatic to enable access to the right audiences? Any example that you can share from any of the campaigns that you've done will help as well.
So, Shiny, I started my career back in 2007 in conventional marketing, right? And those days when we used to talk about a consumer, we used to sit down in a room, 10 of us, and we would think, what would my consumer look like? What would he do? And then when we made advertising strategies, we used to say, okay, my consumer would visit XYZ website, and therefore I should advertise on that website. Now today, because of programmatic, how this paradigm has changed. Today, I don't have to sit, first of all, in a room and ask people, what does my consumer look like? Today, I have data, which actually tells me who exactly is my consumer, at what time, what stage he's purchasing or interacting with my product, and how can I engage with him. So the data science has made it so much easier. Plus programmatic on top of it. Earlier, my question was, where is my consumer going in terms of advertising? Today, that question, because of programmatic, has moved to who is my consumer, when and how can I reach him, which were never in the discussion earlier. So for me, the biggest change is this particular paradigm. And if I were to give you an example, so one of our innovations that we keep talking about at Philips Domestic Appliances is the air fryer, a product which can fry with air. Now, when we started advertising this product, we were reaching out to, as conventional marketing will teach you, kitchen appliance, you go and target a female audience who interacts the most with the product in the kitchen. And therefore, the first media campaigns were always targeted towards the females. So the way programmatic helped us in that sense was, you target a female who is probably browsing, let's say, recipes, frying recipes, and give her the messaging that by using an air fryer for frying the food, she can actually make it more healthier for her family. So this is how the campaign went. But with data, we also understood that there was another cohort which was behaving very differently and engaging very differently with our product, which was males. And later on, we realized that males were actually easier to target and get conversions from, because we were now targeting males watching cricket matches who wanted to have snacks and did not want to stand in the kitchen. So the air fryer became a gadget which can be kept next to the sofa while they're watching the match and just make those French fries or something. So the messaging became, don't waste time standing in the kitchen. Here is your companion to watch your match. This is what programmatic helped us. I mean, I can't think of a better example than this.
Absolutely. I think fantastic targeting and fantastic insights, everyone who's sitting and watching a match, and I don't want to be the woman standing in the kitchen and doing the frying either. So thank you for that product. Absolutely love it.
Manik, I'm one of the person who actually bought it, and the insight is right.
Same. So
thank you.
Great. So thank you, Manik, for those insights. So Mayank, next question is for you. Like Shashi said and like Manik said, access to the right targeting signals and understanding who my audience is, what frame of mind they are in, what is the product that they would like to look at right now, is very important to improve the relevance of ads. And as a demand side platform that actually enables brands to do this, what is your take on this discussion?
Absolutely, Shiny. I mean, a very relevant question. I think access to right signal is the key to identify the most promising customer segments. It ensures that if there is your media strategy is efficient and effective. And at the same time, the right signal also ensures that customer engage with your ad, find them relevant and useful. And therefore, it's a win-win situation for both advertisers as well as the customers, right? Now, but the nuance that I want to add is what qualifies as a right signal, right? And I feel there are two very important properties. One is the signal must be precise and accurate, and second is it should help you gain scale. And there is where Amazon DSP demonstrates phenomenal value addition. Because of the strength of the customer research signal, recency of data, we can help advertisers precisely identify the brand most relevant customer segments. And further, we have the capabilities to identify more customer segment with very high overlap with the identified segment. And therefore, we enable advertisers to scale their advertising spend while retaining efficiency and efficacy. I mean, taking cue from Manik, right? If I were to demonstrate what a value addition, say, a DSP can provide with, or Amazon DSP can provide with, it's like if you want to reach out to say top 30% Amazon shoppers who will be the affluent audience who would be in the TG that you want to reach out to, right? You reach out to them, you see and see how your campaign is performing. And when you look at these reports that these top 30% customers, Amazon shoppers, when they're interacting with your ads, you will be able to identify more such segments like the one that you identified. And then it will, and I think it will be a more structured approach. And that's what my input is. Programmatic on top of it helps you identify a lot more overlapping, highly relevant segments.
Right. So you're saying that, one is identifying the right segment, but making sure that it is not too small an audience. So therefore, you kind of blow it up with more similar kind of categories that
Right.
helps brand actually attain scale and efficiency, right?
Yes.
That's wonderful. And that's the most beautiful combination of this that I can really think of right now. Great. So thank you all. I think we've talked about targeting and how it can get us to the right segment and the right measurement and achieve the right goals. Now, one of the challenges that we talked about initially was ad fraud. And Anil, my question comes to you here, and this is, I know everyone, all of us are struggling with this, that you've seen various industries tackle ad fraud, brand safety. What are the biggest challenges here? If I have to ask you again, top 3 ad tech challenges with respect to ensuring that ad fraud is at a minimal and brand safety is at a minimal.
Shiny, I think you cannot talk about programmatic without talking about these challenges, right? And I feel that all the good that is there in digital and programmatic can very easily get undone by these villains if you're not watchful, right? And I think Manik and Shashi would have a lot of insight into this. So ad fraud, brand safety, brand suitability are key concern areas, no doubt about it. And again, while you have, say, various ad verification tools in place, but let's understand that these, say, fraud can only be mitigated. It cannot be made zero, right? So fraud is getting detected these days in BFSI, OTT, media, gaming, edtech, to the extent that 35 to around 40% of fraud is prevalent on both apps and web in these categories. Now, if I have to just look at 3 broad areas or ad tech challenges, or which is preventing this fraud to get reduced, the first one I would say is that fraudulent methods or fraud methods constantly are getting evolved, and they're finding new ways to challenge anti-fraud solutions, right? And as ad fraud detection gets better at identifying fraudsters, right, the black hats gets forced to become more sophisticated to survive. So we have SIVT, GIVT, sophisticated invalid traffic, GIVT. So I think more and more new ones keep coming up on the platform. And so the arms race between the good and the bad guys continue to perpetuate, right? Secondly, if you look at the advent of new marketplace platforms, right? Say from social networks to dating apps to food delivery, alternative transportation, vacation rentals, digital channels have revolutionized almost every industry. Now, with the growing number of marketplace platforms, especially in recent months, right, fraudsters have shifted their tactics to take advantage of rising in-app and online marketplace purchases. So they're continuously evolving, right? New platforms, new frauds, new techniques, And that's the biggest challenge. While you have, even the solutions have to evolve accordingly. Thirdly, is a very relevant one with respect to India, as I have seen, that if you look at India, we have officially 22 languages, right? Out of which only 5 are supported by Google, right? According to a recent study, 90 to 95% of the video content that we consume or Indians consume are in regional languages. So this calls for immediate attention, because the regular blacklisting tools will be rendered redundant, right? If this stays unaddressed, because keywords and say URLs blocking relies on a basic interpretation of words to categorize content and the associated inventory as safe or unsafe. So I think some of the new challenges are like this, that even on this content aspect, some new solutions are, you have to be very watchful. You have to deploy some ML or AI tactics to make sure that even the content within, even the keywords within the content are safe to go ahead for brand advertising and so on. Yeah.
Great. So it's like a cat and mouse game, constantly catching up with each other, aren't we?
Yeah.
And each, as one gets smarter, the other gets even more smarter. Anyway, so thank you for that answer, Anil. I think it's an ongoing battle that all of us are, strongly on, hopefully on the right side of. Shashi, next question comes to you, and it's going to talk about context. So you work with a lot of premium brands, and context there becomes very important, in the sense that the ad needs to show next to the right kind of content, right? What levers do you use to control this when you do programmatic?
So Shiny, we in fact begun our journey of data frauds and this practice around in 2018, early 2018, right? And this was actually a global decision to sort of move everything through a common radar. Now I can today I can say there are 3 things that we work squarely to sort of minimize it. As Anil rightly said, it's impossible to negate it. You can only minimize it and then manage the risk pertaining. So brand safety is one, the bot traffic is second, and the third is maximizing viewability. Now this combination of these 3 things actually helps us to be at the right place at the right time. And there's a constant pruning of platforms and publishers that we do at our end, which do not comply to these 3 matrices. So it's not one-time job. It's a constant job of sort of negating the publishers. We're not helping us reach our compliance scores to SSM. Another so DoubleVerify is our partner. Are actually helping us to implement this solution at a global level, also for India. Another thing that we started doing here is that how do we ensure that the kind of reach that the publishers are guaranteeing, you're actually getting that kind of reach in that audience. So we work very closely with the Nielsen team to kind of look at the overall in-target reach for a lot of these platforms. And also there, we look at a filter for, a minimum in-target audience. Anything that is going below that, are kind of, constantly, again, the pruning happens there. So I would say between Nielsen and between DoubleVerify, and of course our global teams who are actually constantly helping us to sort of stay on the right track of things, has been beneficial for us. Our bot traffic is also very minimal, but also, as Anil pointed out, it's also industry phenomena. For example, FMCGs are less targeted as compared to a fintech or a BFSI or any other platform where a lot of monetary exchanges are happening. So I think these are the 3 things from an FMCG perspective, I would say to stay clear of. Viewability, bot traffic, minimizing the the context in which your ad appears, so brand suitability. So these are the 3 things which is actually helping us to stay right.
So more than marketing, it's a lot of technical stuff that you need to do, right? That, from what I understand, it's like filter, and then scale on each filter.
It's not that difficult, actually. There's a lot of amazing dashboards that are available, so you don't really need to understand a lot of these texts. But I think the platforms are also getting much better, and also, yes, the marketers are also embracing themselves to understand these dashboards and actually work with the partners to co-create these, right context for our brand communication.
Absolutely. So right partners, having the right KRAs in place, I mean, knowing what you really want, and having a little bit of knowledge of this tech as well, because it can't be left, everything can't be left to other people to manage.
No, absolutely not. Yes.
Great. Manik, same question to you. Do you face similar challenges, when it comes to brand safety, brand suitability, or, contextual targeting? What levers do you use to control all this?
So Shiny, I think the problem is universal. All of us in the digital marketing world would be facing the same challenges. And my answer would be somewhat similar to what just Shashi mentioned, because the levers are going to be very common. But the way we look at it is in a three-pronged approach. So the first pillar that we have in our approach is to have a brand safety policy in place. Broadly, that policy means that the ownership of the brand safety lies with us and not the agency. We don't leave it to the agency ever. Which also means that when we talk to a publisher or the agency, or even in the brief, it is clearly mentioned that brand safety is not a luxury or a good to have. It's a must have. So there has to be no compromise on it. And within this pillar, we also partner up with global organizations like just Shashi mentioned. We partner with Integral Ad Science, who has got algorithms in place to help us do the targeting, make sure that the placements are right. Not only that, help us audit what the agency has or the publishers has actually delivered. So this is the first pillar, which is the policy. The second pillar is very common to what Shashi said, is the white and the blacklists. Now, every big platform is having their own mechanisms of making a whitelist and a blacklist. What we have realized is it's more difficult to work on the blacklist. So we actually focus more on the whitelist, and it makes the job easier for us, a little bit easier for us. So that's the second pillar. And the third pillar is when we are looking at programmatic marketplaces, we consider these premium private marketplaces rather than going to any and every open marketplace for programmatic. And definitely Amazon is one of the key programmatic marketplaces that we use. So this makes the whole thing much more sustainable for us. And I agree with everybody, Anil and Shashi, this risk cannot be taken away. It can only be minimized.
So the risk can only be managed. It cannot be completely zero. And I think one of the most important things, Manik, that you said is owning your safety policy, not leaving that crucial piece to an agency or a publisher or a partner to manage, owning that, focusing on the whitelist rather than the blacklist, and of course, working with premium and private marketplaces. I mean, it's a brilliant three-pronged strategy. Mayank, coming to you, and Manik clearly said that, Amazon Ads is one of the, premium marketplaces that they work with. So, and I want to understand, why is that? Why do brands see you as a premium marketplace to work with? How do you ensure there is, optimal traffic quality and brand safety? How are both of these things taken care of, especially when we know that the world is on Amazon, everyone is on Amazon? How do you take care of these things?
Right. I mean, building on what Manik and Shashi said, right, we totally understand that brand spends a lot more than their media money to build equity. Right from the product design to packaging to in-store or web experience to purchase, post-purchase support. So we understand what is at stake, and we keep a very high bar to preserve advertiser trust and ensure high quality traffic and brand suitable environment is in place. Right now, to ensure high quality traffic, one thing that we do is that we serve the ad only to a viewer once we have established a match with Amazon identity. That is, if we know that this is the person that we can identify who is an Amazon shopper, only then we serve an ad. This takes care of ad fraud, to a large extent. We also deploy proprietary traffic quality system which are always on, who filter out traffic before it is bid on and scrub it post impression from reporting and billing. Right now, from a brand suitability and safety measures, let's look at Amazon exclusive inventory and third party inventory separately. Now, an interesting thought that I came across on web was that if you remove an option to purchase products from Amazon, what is that we are left with? We are actually left with largest product content platform on earth, which offers a high degree of contextuality as far as the products are concerned, right? So it's safe to assume that, because of the scale that we have, Amazon owned and operated properties have the perfect mix of audience demography, contextual content proximity, and scale to help advertisers identify the most brand suitable ad supply. So let's take an example. An ad from Finish on product detail pages of dishwasher, even if the ad is not clicked or not being engaged upon, does create a positive association, which resonates with the value proposition of Finish, that it takes care of your dishwasher or dishes, right? Now let's look at the third party, inventory from a third party inventory perspective. We programmatically review and block ad supply which has offensive or violent content. We provide pre-bid targeting and post-impression verification and blocking products. We also extend support to all the 3P vendors. I mean, Manik talked about, integral ad science. Shashi talked about double verify. We also extend support to Oracle Data Cloud. And last but not the least, we are tax certified against fraud and IAB Gold certified. It's basically, I wouldn't say a certification is like a foolproof thing, but whatever industry expect us to deliver on, we ensure that we prioritize on that and adequately, work around our system to ensure that we preserve and delight our advertisers. We preserve the trust and delight our advertisers.
Fantastic. So it's an ongoing battle, be it the agency, be it the brand, be it the DSP, be it the publisher. It's an ongoing battle, and it's good to see that all of you are in this, in this together, because we've got to work together to make this happen. So I think we've spoken about targeting, we've spoken about ad fraud, brand safety, coming to one of the most important things in a digital marketer's life, which is measurement, and attribution. These are, I think, two of the most commonly held challenges across the industry. So Shashi, my first question comes to you here, that, due to the increase in demand for performance from marketing spends, and because digital can be measured to every inch of its life, I think more is demanded of us than other traditional marketers. Marketers are looking at newer mechanisms to better evaluate their upper funnel campaigns, where there is no clear measure of customer acquisition. How do you take care of this? How do you kind of use your upper funnel marketing? How do you evaluate it, and then create more opportunities for customer acquisition from there?
It's a very interesting question, Shaini. And I'm sure, all of us here, be it a brand, agency, or DSP or tech, I think we are all trying to sort of solve for this. Now, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you are wanting to understand the upper funnel, impact where there is no D2C, right? Because the acquisition can't be tracked. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, so let's remove the D2C brands and let's talk about brands where maybe they are selling it on a marketplace like an Amazon or any other, platform. So, I think first and foremost, it's important to look at the full funnel, right? Yes, I mean, the question is on the upper funnel because most of the lower funnel are looked at in a lens with a ROAS. That, okay, you put, $2, how much do you get in return? Right. In fact, when we started working with Amazon DSP, last year, it was still in the beta, thing. And I totally, love the proposition, what, they brought to the table, because that's a big question that I've always wanted to understand that, once the click happens to Amazon, we don't know what happens, right? But Amazon DSP actually helps you target the Amazon customers outside of Amazon. And with all the possible, targeting parameters, signals, and everything else, right? And if you look at initially when we started, we started looking at the bottom funnel campaigns. Then there was a ROAS attached to it, etc. And then we said, okay, let's look at the upper funnels also. And moment we looked at upper funnel and the initial thing, and I would tell to a lot of people who are starting doing these things now, we got into a thing of, okay, so it's an ROI, let's look at ROAS in the upper funnel also. Now, that is something which is, not the right way of looking at things. And later we understood, because the way we work with Amazon DSP is at a two-pronged approach. One is, how do we broaden and strengthen the top funnel? And how do we nurture the bottom funnel? because when we broaden the top funnel, we are actually getting it's a penetration exercise. We're getting new consumers to the brand who have not, for example, bought your brand for the last 12 months, right? So here's a signal which is actually going and recruiting new customers. So the upper funnel is important to drive the new to business, and over a period of time, because the funnel is basically churned. And when I look back at the data now in the last 8 months, for one of my most mass and a premium brand, I'm actually seeing the bottom funnel grow to 3x. There and a bottom funnel will only grow when you start milking and drilling the top funnel. So therefore, looking at the top funnel with a very clear filter of looking at only the penetration or the new business, new consumers that you are bringing to the business, and then start churning and nurturing them. And finally, when they reach your bottom funnel, the ROAS will be much higher. And the idea is that how do we constantly grow it? So I would actually look at evaluating the upper funnel through very simple new to brand and brand penetration. That really helped us. Yeah.
Okay. So new to brands and brand penetration and nurturing the upper funnel early on is kind of helped you grow the bottom funnel much, much larger. Manik, similar question to when we all did our MBAs and we did a little bit of marketing, whatever was taught to us as marketing at that time was, here is your brand campaign and here is your performance campaign. Performance campaign will give you all the sales. And here is your brand campaign. Don't expect anything to come out of it. Except maybe some people will see that billboard that, you put up and paid lakhs of rupees for. But today, that's no longer the case. As marketers, especially as digital marketers, like I said, we are, measured. Our performance is measured to the very inch of our lives. So how does Philips Domestic Appliances kind of balance these two, the branding and the performance aspect of it, and not like look at them in isolation?
Shiny, the statement that you just made actually reminds me of a quote by Mr. John Wanamaker. Now, this was a pioneer in advertising in the late, you can say 1890s in the US. And this guy's quote was, half of the money I spend in advertising is wasted. The question is which half? I don't know. So you are asking the same question. In today's world, still this quote is very relevant, because we keep debating whether we should be spending top of funnel. We don't get adequate returns. And while we are measured every day on ROAS, ROI, etc., we should be pulling more and more money towards the bottom of the funnel so that we can justify the spends that we are doing. But you will hear more and more, like just Shashi said, my media manager every week, he comes back and he tells me, boss, if you don't keep investing the right amount of money in the top of the funnel, at some point in time, my CPA and CPL in the bottom funnel will start going up. So in order to maintain an effective bottom funnel, an effective top funnel is absolutely critical. Now, I can give you a small example here. We have hydrogen and oxygen, which are two gases, right? They exist independently in the atmosphere. Only when they come together in the right ratio, in the right environment, do they form water, which is the business result which we want. Which means that if I need to get water from hydrogen and oxygen, I need to put them in the exact same constrained environment in the exact ratio which is required. The larger question is, how do you figure out what is the right ratio? And honestly, I would say that is not a science. That is the only thing that is still the art of marketing. And that is why people like us are required. Otherwise, we would also be replaced by an artificial intelligence tool, which would say 70% top funnel, 30% bottom funnel done. How do we make this call? So we look at categories, and I'll again take an example of, let's say, an air fryer. When we launched the air fryer back in 2012, at that point in time, me going to somebody and saying, hey, here is an air fryer, go and buy it. The first question would come, what the hell is an air fryer? Can you really fry with air? So the first job to do was to create awareness that there is a product which can actually fry with air. The second job was, once the consumer is aware that there is a product which can fry with air, the second question the consumer had was, can it really fry as good as a oil fried thing? Does it taste same? Does it taste different? That is where he's into the consideration phase. So my campaign needs to be a consideration campaign. So top of the funnel to the consideration. Now, once he's convinced that the taste does not change and the product really works, is only when he moves to a conversion funnel. So that is when I start doing conversion campaigns. So category by category, we look at the category and we say, okay, air fryer, I need to invest so much in awareness and so much in consideration because of this challenge. But a product like a mixer grinder, which is probably their most penetrated kitchen appliances in India, I don't need to educate a consumer what a mixer grinder is. So probably I can invest a little bit more in the conversion funnel. So this is the art that marketeers like us are using to stay relevant.
Fantastic. So basically what you're saying is that different products are, like humans, they are in different cycles of their life. A mixer grinder is something everyone has, everyone knows what it does, everyone's seen one, for God's sake. So you don't need to sell it to them, you don't need awareness there. But an air fryer, definitely, one of the newer entrants into the market. Even I think purifiers, filters, and air purifiers.
Absolutely.
5 years, 7 years back, I wouldn't have bought one, but looking at the condition outside my window right now, I definitely have one in every room. So thank you, Manik, for that. Anil, coming to you, we've heard the brands talk about, it being an art and not really a science, and still an art to, balance the upper funnel and the bottom funnel, the performance, the branding, the organic, the paid, it's still so important. And measurement, like all of them said, half of the money is wasted and we really don't know what half. As an agency head, as a person who's been, working with these challenges for so long, what are your top 3 tips to brands for evolving their marketing strategy?
Right, Shiny. So see, I feel if you can't measure, you cannot manage, right? And if you can't measure, you cannot improve even. And even if you are able to measure, but measure it wrongly, you're still in the dark. So as you rightly said initially, that there are many and more tools up there for marketeers to make use of. But I think today marketeers are operating in unprecedented times, and they urgently need to measure the real outcomes to enable them to maximize ROI, right? As Shashi and Manik said. Now, I won't refer to these as tips, but rather just my point of view on how it should be looked at. When you asked whether we can look at branding and performance separately, I would rather go a step forward and say that there should be a unified way of measuring all consumer touchpoints. It's not only branding and performance within the digital domain, but even online to offline and vice versa. Because this should include all channels, plus even long-term, say, structural factors such as brand size, incrementality, short-term creative factors such as, say, for example, duration, the copy quality, copy rotation, short-term media factors such as reach, frequency, ad clutter, including a shift. I would rather, I might be making a big statement here, but including a shift from measuring, say, viewability or opportunity to see to actual attention metrics, because those are the things that are moving your brand metrics or actual end outcomes, right? Secondly, I feel that there should be a standardization of metrics and data so that there is a common yardstick to measure, especially, I'm talking this, especially for brands which operate across markets, right? Which would include pricing, promotions, media platforms, and this will allow marketers to compare ROI across markets and provide better benchmarking. Thirdly, I think we've all heard about this privacy thing coming into being, and a lot of ad tech platforms, I think, taking up a lot of, making a lot of changes to adhere to those changes. And I would say that marketers should evolve and start looking at some new age tools like data clean rooms, which all of us have heard. And there are different players who have already come up with these data clean rooms, and start using them, or start at least experimenting them in a way because they help to uncover a lot of insights in a privacy compliant way, which were not possible till now. And this will become a vogue going forward when we enter into the cookieless future. So these are just my observations, and I think my point of view on how we should start looking at this measurement piece.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is, one, we need to start looking at right metrics. The metrics that you're looking at are not obviously not not essentially the best, maybe. Two, we should have a single source of truth. So we should all be looking at similar metrics across platforms, across channels. I think programmatic, nothing can get better than programmatic for doing that. And the third thing is to, have clean, safe, spaces where you can actually process your first party data or the data that you own and, create insights that, that you can actually put into use when you're doing marketing. And it's not just limited to age, gender and location and those kind of things, but real insights that marketers can actually use. Is that right, Anil?
Yeah, Shiny, yeah.
Awesome. So Mayank, coming to you, and we've heard all the demands, I would say. So Shashi's told us what he needs, and Manik has told us what Philips is looking at, and Anil is saying that these are the three things that we really must have right now. So Amazon does have access to the full funnel view of the customer journey. How can DSPs like the Amazon DSP actually help brands measure the true impact of their campaigns?
Right. I mean, great question. And I think, after hearing from Anil, Manik and Shashi, I won't say that, we have a solution in place to meet all the needs right now, but we do feel that we are at least progressing in the right direction, right? And just to start, let me answer this question from two perspectives. One is that from a short-term perspective, which is measurement at a campaign level. And second is the long-term perspective, which is measurement across multiple campaigns, right? So from a short-term perspective or a measurement at a campaign level, in addition to the usual ad metrics like impression, click, sales, ROAS, Amazon DSP provides advertisers with two unique metrics. I mean, Shashi already talked about new to brand sales or customer, which basically help brand managers measure and optimize proportion of new customers that they have acquired as part of the campaign, right? The second important metrics, which I feel is there, is branded searches. This metrics help advertiser measure improvement in branded searches on the platform, which can be attributed to the campaign. This is a more solid metric to evaluate because it showcases the actual downstream impact of the brand campaign. Together, both these metrics offer a lot more insights to advertiser on how they should be optimizing campaign spend. But as I said, this is at a campaign level, that how did my campaign do well along with ROAS, and did it actually change a customer research behavior on the platform, or were we able to acquire more new customers as part of the campaign? See, from a long-term perspective, we have a very powerful analytical tool called Amazon Pie that help brand measure how their market share on Amazon has trended quarter over quarter, or what does the pace of acquisition of new customer look like if you compare it with the category or with top peers. It also offers you insights around how a customer lifetime value is looking for your brand or your product. It also gives insights like about which product customer considered, but eventually left for some alternative product, etc. Now, imagine having access to these insights which Amazon Pie offers and a lever to optimize them through Amazon DSP, right? So what we are saying is that, you take a snapshot in January 2022, you look at what your market share is, at what rate you're acquiring new customers, what is the customer lifetime values looking like? And you imagine, a series of campaigns that you run on Amazon, and then you take snapshot again, in June or July or September or October, and then you see with the incremental spends and optimization that you've done through programmatic or through Amazon DSP, were you able to move these hard metrics? This opens up an excellent avenue to ensure your long-term media strategy continues to focus on delivering key business results, right? And I mean, I'm frankly not aware of any other publisher who can provide you with this kind of hard-coded data and attribution on how your digital spends are actually moving business metrics. So, there we are. I won't say that we are perfect, but I believe that we at least have something on ground, and we're continuously building on top of it, so that one fine day, and I'm hopeful it is very close, I'll come back to Anil, Shashi, and Manik that, we are there, guys. And this is what you asked for, and this is what we have.
Fantastic. What better? It feels like Christmas already that, we're asking for stuff and getting it built live. So Mayank, what you're saying is that one need to look at attribution on a short-term basis and LTV on a long-term basis. And while programmatic looks easy and real time, and I see this campaign is not converting, switch it off, this campaign is converting, switch it on, and do those kind of things, we also need to focus on certain long-term avenues and long-term measures here so that, your advertiser is not bored with you and your campaigns are increasingly more efficient, like we're talking about in measurement, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that was my last question. And thank you so much. I think we had a wonderful conversation. To all our audiences here, if you've been listening to this, and I'm sure all of us have, been enriched with really good nuggets. We have some really good insights from an agency perspective, from a DSP perspective, and from really two solid brands, Reckitt and Philips Domestic Appliances. Thank you, speakers. Thank you for being so true and so insightful and sharing some of those secrets. I know it's not easy, something that's taken you so long to learn. It's not easy to give it out so easy, but thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you, Shiny. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shiny. It was wonderful to be part of the panel, and thanks everyone, Anil, Mayank, Manik,